Hi, Ruben Swartz here, your host and chief nerd. Welcome to Sales for Nerds, where I try to distill years of struggling with sales and marketing so you can learn the easy way. Plus, get the scoop from other folks who have accidentally ended up in sales and learned that it doesn't have to suck. Now, as a software person who hated conventional CRMs, I ended up creating my own for folks like me in professional services who would rather be doing client work than sales and marketing. It's got a whole new take on lead magnets, a new way to think about conversations and referrals, proposal automation, e-signature, and if you're the only one in your company selling, or maybe the only person in your company, it's got features so you don't feel so alone. Start your free trial at Mimiran.com. That's Mimiran.com. And even if you're not looking for a CRM, you'll find proposal templates, checklists, and more to help you grow your business. Now let's get to it. Today, I'm really excited to be here with Melisa Liberman. She is the host of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. That sounds like the kind of podcast that you want to check out. She's also a business coach for independent consultants who's created the Double program, which helps consultants make more money and more impact without sacrificing their flexibility and freedom. I like that. She's here today to talk about mindset and the shift in mindset that you have to go through when you leave the corporate world and start your own independent consulting business. So Melisa, welcome to Sales for Nerds. What do you have in your glass?
Thanks for having me, Ruben. It's so much fun. I am drinking some Pinot Noir today and it's perfect.
Now, do you have a name label on the bottle or anything in case we want to recommend this to people, or is it just Pinot? It's house Pinot.
It's house Pinot, my friend.
All right.
All I've got. I always have some bottle open in the fridge. So whatever was open today, that's what I've got.
I like how you roll. Now I'm going to sound super snooty because I've got this Grave de Pays Saint Estèphe Bordeaux, mostly Cab, a little Merlot, a little Petit Verdot, and it's really drinking quite deliciously. So I'm happy to have you here. Cheers.
Cheers, my friend. So good.
So how did you get into this whole independent consulting coaching world?
Yeah, so I'll give you the short version of the long version. I started out my career at Accenture and just absolutely loved consulting and all the type A personalities and figuring out how to solve client problems. And then quickly from there, I moved on to building a SaaS software company from the ground up to an exit. And thank you. Cheers. And so toward the end of that run, which was about 12 years, my husband got an opportunity to move to Hawaii for us to move to Hawaii for a job opportunity he had there. And so I had to make the decision at that point what to do with my career. And quite frankly, I know that no one's going to have sympathy for me at all. I have no sympathy for myself. But at the time, I was thinking, this is terrible. I have to quit my job, this company that I've helped build and that I love, and this amazing team that I've built, and move to Hawaii. This is horrible. It turns out that actually wasn't horrible at all. It was such a great kind of forcing function to leave corporate. The company ended up asking me when I resigned, can you come back and work as a management consultant, which I'm embarrassed to say never crossed my mind at the time. But thankfully, I became an accidental consultant and was able to help startups scale, working, part-time and living on a tropical island and all the things. So, that was really the beginnings for me 10 years ago, getting into consulting. And then about halfway, after 4 or 5 years, I noticed that not only was I consulting, but I was also doing a lot of coaching. People would pull me aside and say, Melisa, how do I do what you're doing? I want to start my own. I want to be a consultant. I want to work for myself. I want to have the flexibility to work wherever I want to work, to be able to arrange my schedule around my family and all of those kinds of things. So I started coaching people on the side to help them with those types of goals that they had. And then over time, I just realized this is where my heart is. And so I got certified as a coach, and I've been doing that, coaching both executives and business owners for the last 5 years or so. Okay. So that is the short version of the story. Shortest that I can give you.
That's awesome. So for folks listening who may not be clear on the distinction, what's the difference between consulting and coaching?
That's such a good question. I get that a lot. And I think a lot of people make assumptions, and there's some overlap for sure. There's definitely some overlap, but the way I like to describe it is you hire consultants to come in and do something for you. So to create a result, to produce deliverables, and to really, for example, implement software or create a change management approach, that kind of thing. As a coach, I'm guiding people to do that work for themselves.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So just like a golf coach doesn't actually swing the club for you, they teach you how to do it.
Exactly. Which I find to be so important as a business owner, because as we're learning to become a business owner as opposed to an employee, we have to start thinking in such a different way. And we have to start getting into the place where we're able to think like that business owner and execute like that business owner, and not necessarily rely on other people to do it for us, like we were relying in corporate on, all the different functions to support each other. So to me, as a coach, helping other independent consulting business owners be successful, it's so important to be that guide, that mentor, the person who's helping them see their blind spots, to see around corners, to ask them questions they wouldn't necessarily ask themselves, but not to dig in and do the work for them, because then it just becomes kind of this perpetuating cycle where
Okay.
they're not necessarily, stepping into being the business owner themselves.
That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So when folks do leave corporate and set up their own shop, shingle, whatever you want to refer to it, website, LinkedIn profile, what should they be doing and what do they often sometimes maybe do instead?
Yeah, I think there's so many things they should be doing. A lot of times what happens is we become a consultant and we land project work fairly quickly from our former employer or from a past colleague or someone that we know and that knows us. And so it feels pretty natural to transition into consulting work. And then so we just dive in to do the work, which we love doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't necessarily realize that, this happened to me, Ruben. I think it took me 3 years to really realize that I was a business owner. I was just I was a project manager. I was a strategy consultant, whatever the things are that I was doing.
Right.
That's how I thought about myself. And it dawned on me, within 3 years later, you own a business, Melissa. You should be really thinking about this more strategically, about how you're going to acquire new clients, how you're going to do the type of work you love versus just taking the work that comes to you and settling for, it's easy, right? You're whoever's coming to you, you take the work. And, for me, I was just talking myself into, I'll just take that rate. It'll be a way to get my foot in the door,
Mm-hmm.
and just not thinking about the business in a strategic way of what am I offering and what is the pricing around it and what is my lead generation process, and thinking about the business in a much more proactive way versus a reactive way.
So it's
And I
almost
find
like
that so common. Yeah.
when I'm hearing this, it's almost like I'm hearing, especially when you get that lucky referral or past client helping you get launched, you almost end up like a subcontractor without necessarily a primary contractor there feeding you work. And then you sit there waiting, wondering when the world in general, the universe is going to give you another contract, right?
Yeah. I find it to be so common with so many of the independent consultants that I work with, of just not really realizing how much control that they do have over the process of acquiring a new client. And instead they feel like they either need to wait for someone to come to them that they knew in the past, like we were just talking about, or they end up relying on recruiters who are taking a big cut of the work that they're doing, and kind of turn into more of staff augmentation, really, than into being the consultant that they can be, who's earning and fulfilling the amount of money that they could be, that they're fully capable of making.
They're making the money and also fulfilling their mission,
Yeah,
sort of spiritually and psychologically. And you said something really interesting there that I think is great. I want to highlight it. They don't realize the amount of control they have.
Yeah.
And so they kind of sit there passively. What should they be doing to sort of come into accepting their power and using it wisely?
Yeah, I think the work that you do, Ruben, is so critical to this so many of us as consultants don't like selling. We think that selling, it has all these connotations, right? And for a lot of us as consultants, we've been on the bad end of sales
Hmm.
deals, right? We go with the salesperson who goes and sells something that we're hearing them sell it. And I don't know about you, but I've been in those rooms. I'm like, I literally was kicking the sales guy he was like a brother to me under the table just because I knew what he was selling and that did not match what we did. And
Right.
I was going to have to be the one to figure it out to deliver it, which I did. And so the cycle was perpetuating, right? So we have, I think as consultants, so often we have these mental models in our head about what selling it, how selling is exaggerating
Hmm.
and convincing people and disingenuous. And so that's certainly nothing we want to be involved in. We want to go help people find solutions to problems, not make new problems or bigger problems.
Right.
And so anyway, I think just being able to really get their arms around, as you're transitioning from corporate into becoming a business owner of a consulting business, really being able to look at what the sales process is, what business development is. And it's really finding people with problems, finding companies with problems that you can help to solve, and really looking at things in a different way so that you aren't kind of putting yourself in this cycle of feeling like you just have to take what comes to you, but instead you can get really comfortable that you can be in the driver's seat, finding those people with the problems that you like to solve, vetting whether they're the right fit for what you do as a consultant, and referring them out to someone else who, if they aren't a good fit, and then proceeding forward if they are.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And can we maybe give an example or some things that people should do specifically? Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people they read that advice or they hear that advice and they're like, well, I can solve lots of problems. And that's almost their
Right.
downfall.
Yes, it is their downfall in so many ways, because we that's what we do. We solve problems. And so at a very granular level, as people are leaving corporate to get into consulting, and maybe they've usually got a few projects under their belt, so they know what they like and what they don't like as much. Really getting clear on who is the ideal client for them. Like, what does that ideal client look like? What kinds of, what function do they play in an organization? What industry are they in? What all the different variables. I like to think of it as a Rubik's cube. How would I mix all of this together to kind of create that perfect client for me, and the type of problem that they have that I would love to be solving, and getting very clear on who that is, what kind of problem they have, and what result that you deliver. So many times, I work with a lot of project managers, for example, and so many times I say to them when we first start talking, what do you do? And they, how do you solve problems for your clients? And they say, I'm a project manager for HR type projects, or for software implementations, or whatever the thing is. And that's not the positioning that you want to be creating as a consultant. You want to be talking about what are the business results that you're creating, what problems that someone cares about. Why would they care about solving them? It's not just because you can solve it or because you have that skill set. It's much more about flipping that into what the benefits are, and the results are that you can help them accomplish.
That's
So
great.
those are some of the first couple of steps, is just getting really clear on the type of results that you deliver versus if you think about it from a software development perspective, it's the benefits versus the features.
Right.
Yeah.
And you said a couple more really interesting things that I want to
Mm,
highlight again. You said it's not just about what you can do, because you can do tons of things.
mm,
And there a while earlier you said it's about what you love doing most.
yeah.
And how can you, so I think for a lot of people, they struggle because they can do X, Y, and Z, and they maybe do all of those projects, but what do they love most? If they had to just focus on one, that's, I think, a great way to figure out your internal compass and lead you in the right direction. Thanks for pulling that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. A couple of questions that I love asking clients in that regard are, if you zoom out 3 years from now and your consulting practice is wildly successful, what type of clients are you working with and what type of projects are you doing? So that we're not just stuck down in this headspace of like what feels available to me right now.
Mhm.
It's like, what am I actually moving toward? And what would that look like when I've got a little bit of distance between where I'm at in this moment and where I want to be?
Okay, that's great. So we're kind of focusing on positioning, and people who listen to this podcast know that I beat this drum and beat it because it used to beat on me for so many years. So much better to beat the drum yourself. Now, assuming we've got that, what should people be doing? Because I think the biggest change for most folks is it's not that I have to worry about payroll taxes and all that. That's a pain in the neck, but I can outsource that to someone else. It's how do I actually get clients? Right. They used to be people, my boss would come in and give me a project. Now I've actually got to go find that client.
Yes. And, it's really, to me, twofold. The first is the strategy, which your software walks them through a lot of that strategy just naturally by way of the workflow. If they're not yet using your software, they should, but if they're not, it's really helping, figuring out how can I start conversations with people who may or may, just with people to start with. At some point, you want to narrow it down to who your ideal client is, or potentially a referral partner, or someone who's accumulated your an existing audience of your ideal clients. And really getting clear on those conversations and talking with those individuals about, first of all, getting them on the phone because they want to be there, and helping them to solve micro problems as you're, having those conversations to really pull out whether or not they've got a problem that they care about solving, that they want to solve now, and that, you can walk them through what the solution would look like. So that's the next step after you've got that positioning, somewhat dialed in, is then going out to test it with those types of conversations. First getting, creating the conversations, and then figuring out what resonates with people and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's it. I'm 100% in alignment there. And I think that's really, it's very hard to complete your positioning. Like you say, you can kind of take that first stab at it, and that's really important. You kind of have a hypothesis, then you test it. And then what the other people say can really help you nail that positioning, because they may use words that are different than what you were thinking of, that get more to those benefits and the real way they describe the problems, so that you can seek them out appropriately. Instead of, sometimes it's like, if you're a doctor, you think the problem is some Latin thing that is the tendon in the knee or something. Whereas for the person with the knee pain, it's my knee hurts. Right. And sometimes we're just so smart about the area we're in, we can't get to the my knee hurts part. And I want to go skiing again or whatever.
Right. Yeah, we're 10 steps ahead. And then the other half of that, so we talked a little bit about the strategy side of the equation, Ruben. The other half of the equation that I think a lot of people overlook is the mindset side of this equation. Having a powerful business development mindset as you're going through and executing at each step of this process is so important. It's really looking at how am I thinking about this situation and myself right now? And where am I holding myself back? So things like, I'm not good at this. I'm an introvert, you and I've been talking about this, like having those types of thoughts about, or I don't have a big name attached to myself anymore. I used to be able to get these calls because I was the vice president of such and such. And now at this company, so I had 2 titles to lean on, and now I've got nothing. And so helping to rebuild that self-identity, helping to really get yourself into the mindset of, I do control. What do I control about this process versus this is out of my control, and really dialing in what I call high quality thinking versus just letting your primitive brain run the show, which never ends well.
So that's a great point. And I think everyone would be in violent agreement with all that. But then you actually go to pick up the phone or contemplate picking up the phone or whatever, and the lizard brain kicks in and you go, what do you do there to talk yourself through it and get to where you need to be? So you can build up that confidence, because it's a habit. It's a muscle, right? You can't.
It is a habit. Yeah. It is a muscle. It is a habit. It is a muscle. It is literally you creating new neural pathways in your brain, so that eventually when you pick up the phone, The version of the lizard brain is one that serves you. So in the beginning, what that looks like is really intentionally figuring out, how do I want to be thinking about this conversation that I'm going to be having? How do I want to be thinking about myself? Do I want to be thinking about myself as I'm bad at marketing, I'm bad at selling, I'm bad at having conversations, and not giving myself the benefit of the doubt, and feeling as a result of those thoughts about myself as, inadequate and incapable, and not and lacking confidence, versus really having a pre-game ritual to say, what am I going to purposefully think about myself that's realistic? We're not trying to put a lipstick on a pig here. We're not trying to just create a mantra and talk yourself into something you don't believe, but purposefully creating a mindset, like a pre-game ritual that you can get into before you have a call, for example, that says, one of the simplest ways to get into this headspace, Ruben, from feeling lack of confidence to move yourself into curiosity or into openness by thinking, this is not a make it or break it situation here. Instead, I'm going to have a conversation with someone, and I'm really good at figuring out what their problems might be. And it creates a feeling of curiosity versus going into it feeling inadequate or pressured in some way. So creating that pre-game ritual for yourself, whatever you're doing in the business development life cycle, can be incredibly valuable as a way to build up those new neural pathways.
I think that's a great point. And I know that when I sort of started down this path, and especially because I would sit in these high-powered sales meetings, and the VP of sales would be beating on people to close the deal, get it closed, do whatever you have to do. And then I would get in meetings and think that I was supposed to act that way, which is totally unnatural for me.
Yeah.
And I would think, I'm so bad at this, just like you were saying, because I am, and I have no desire to be good at it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was regarding it as a necessary evil and trying to make it work. And it was just terrible, versus, as you say, what are the actual goals? Let's have a conversation and just explore what's going on. Right. We're not at a closed stage anyway. Right. We're just talking like two people who care about this subject. And I think that's something that's so easy for experts to do. Right. Like that's what they actually really get energy from.
Yeah.
Versus,
yeah, absolutely.
Right. Let the client ask you for the proposal, and they'll close themselves when and if the time is right.
Yeah. If you can get yourself into that kind of openness, into that curiosity versus I better go close this. My life depends on it, and I'm terrible at doing it, so it's going to be a rough one,
Right.
that kind of thought process. The other way I like to look at this, Ruben, is kind of back to our Rubik's Cube. You go find a lead generation method. There's so many of them out there. Go find one that's pretty close to fitting with your personality, with something you enjoy doing, having honestly, I think it might sound strange. It does to most people, but there are people out there who love cold calling. And so go figure out how to be the best cold caller you can be in the pockets of time you've got for your consulting business. There are other people that absolutely hate that. And no amount of mindset work is going to create some alignment for them in that method. So for those people, go create a method where you're hosting executive roundtables, as an example, and creating collaboration between people that you're not even the one who's driving you're maybe facilitating, but you're not the bulk of the speaking. Even the people that you've brought together, you're creating value by just that exchange of information, and they see you as the go-to as a result. So really figuring out what is the most aligned marketing method for you, business development method for you, and then putting that mindset on top of it, where you're really coming at it from more curiosity and openness versus fear and pressure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for example, some people hate video, they just can't do it, but they love to write. A lot of people hate to write, but if you talk to them, they clearly are an expert and love what they do. But if you ask them to put that in a blog post or a lead magnet, they just can't do it. Right. So you just hire somebody to video you and interview you, and all that stuff just falls out naturally, whether you leave it in video or you transcribe it. Either way, it plays to your strengths instead of trying to make you somebody that you're not.
Yeah.
And there was a guy on this podcast, I can't even remember what episode it was, but Chris Wyke, he's a lawyer, and the big lead gen thing they do, because they love wine. This is how I got to know him. Actually, they have like 1,000 or 2,000 bottles of wine in their conference room.
Mm.
And once a month they have, pre-COVID at least, they had, people come in and they just open some wine and everyone has a great time.
And so memorable, right?
Right.
So memorable because it attaches who they are to some way of bringing people together. And that's so much more memorable than just executing some script you got or
And
whatever.
they love it, right? So they bring good energy to the table,
Yes, absolutely.
so to
Yeah.
speak. No pun intended.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got some sense of mindset and positioning and going out and doing business development in a way that is congruent with us, authentic to ourselves.
Mhm.
What else should people be thinking about in terms of their mindset? What happens when inevitably something does go wrong? You do get rejected, or
Mhm.
I don't know, life happens.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a few things to answer that question. As you think about being a business owner versus an employee, and most of us have not been in, if we came from sales in corporate to being a business owner, some of this isn't so raw, because we're used to being rejected. But for those of us who didn't come from from a sales background and are now a business owner, we've got to reconcile the fact that there is rejection involved in this process as a business owner, and it's really part of doing business. And so one of the things that I love doing with my clients is really helping them to fail on purpose. What can we be doing here in your process that really creates failure, that pushes you to the borders of where you're comfortable, so that failure doesn't become such a something that we're avoiding. I know early in my career as a consultant, I said to someone, I'll never forget, I've never failed and I never plan to. And now I just laugh at that because first of all, I don't think it was true. And second of all, if it was true, then it means that I wasn't pushing myself enough. And so thinking about it now and looking back, I laugh, but I see so many people in that it feels so scary to be a business owner all of a sudden, and to have all of the responsibility of driving revenue and delivering on your shoulders. But to be able to look at this in a way that really, where you see failure as a positive, that it means that you're testing out new methods of doing business, that it means you're testing out new ways of maybe balancing business development and client delivery, or multiple clients at one time. And you're really testing and trying out your processes, and the way that you're doing your business. It means that you're succeeding, ultimately, on a pile of failures, as they say.
That's a
Yeah.
great point. And I think especially when you're an expert and you're used to, whether it's 100%, or some people might concede, hey, 10% of our projects are big pains in the ass or whatever.
Right.
But generally speaking, they almost always or always succeed, to going to
Yes.
sales and marketing, where almost by definition, a lot of it doesn't succeed, in the sense that these people don't become clients. They drop out when they hit your website, they drop out after a conversation, they drop out,
Yeah.
after 4 conversations, after the proposal, they go with someone else, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's just the nature of the game. And I think there's something about that mindset of, I need to be in control of everything.
Mm.
It's kind of
Yeah.
like what you were talking about earlier. Sometimes we overemphasize a lot of the stuff that we don't really control, and we focus on that instead of the stuff where we have all this amazing power that
Mm.
we're not even willing to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a key component of being a business owner and transitioning from that employee mindset into the business owner mindset, is to really understand that most of running your business is a big scientific experiment, and you're going to fail a very good percentage of the time. And to make sure that you're chasing the right thing, like chasing 100% close rate, for example, in your sales process, is probably not going to the right direction.
Mhm.
That you've that's solving the wrong problem, for example. Instead of just really getting comfortable with that trial and error, and constantly innovating and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, and knowing that changes over time.
Well, they call it a consulting practice for a reason, right?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
sometimes we lose sight of that, and we think we're supposed to know everything about everything all the time. And if the people who are experts in their domain, you all know how much time and mental energy you have put into achieving that level of mastery. And now you're tacking on the business ownership thing, right? Which some people devote
Right,
their whole lives just to running businesses.
right.
And so it's a lot. And I think you bring a great perspective to it that I wish I'd had when I was starting, because
Mm,
I have had a lot of trouble with that feeling of not being in control.
yes,
And so I
yes.
relinquished control of stuff that I should have totally been in control of, and
Yeah,
drove myself crazy over things I didn't have control over. It was like being in the lower left quadrant or whatever of where I
right.
should have been mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the other place that this shows up, Ruben, is in pricing as you're moving through the process and really figuring out what your pricing is and figuring out how to think about this as a business owner and the value that you're delivering versus really taking it down to, well, this is what I would have. I hear this so often from people. Well, I would have been making this amount if I translated it into an hourly rate. This is what I probably would be making right now if I were in corporate. So that's what I'll charge. And really being able to look at it from not that employee lens, which that is, into a business owner's lens and saying, you know what is the ultimate value that this project is delivering to the client, and figuring out the way to quantify that, especially when it's maybe not quite as a ROI driven type of a project where you can really quantify those things that are a little bit harder to measure, but getting yourself into that place as you're building out proposals and thinking about it from a business owner's perspective and pricing yourself accordingly. So I think that's another big thing that I see with people moving out of corporate into consulting, is them under earning because of that.
Absolutely. And it creates this vicious cycle where you undercharge. Sometimes you lose business because you're not
Mm,
credible. And then
yeah,
if you get it, you don't get as much respect as the person who's charging 2 or 3 or 10x as much as you
right.
for the same work.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, the client that is eager to pay proper value for your work, because they're getting great value, right? They're not signing
right.
the deal to get a bad deal for themselves. They're signing it because they think it's a great deal. Those people respect you. They treat the project better. You have better outcomes. You get more help from the client team and so on. And it all works in a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that you can, kind of bringing it back to our theme here, knowing that you can drive those conversations, that you do have control over it, that you don't just have to take what you think they're going to give you, can make such a big difference in the amount of income you're making, but also, to your point, the impact that you're having because of the way that you're seeing yourself as you're proposing that, and the way they see you in turn as an expert.
Right. And then if you're making 2x or 1.5x or whatever it is, you can then invest that back into the business. You can be more picky about other folks who might kind of grind you down financially and mentally, and good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, what do you think about, just sort of a side question about pricing, but a lot of times it is really hard, even for the prospect, to know exactly what they want. So I
Mhm.
sometimes tell people, hey, well, give the client some options like A,
Yeah,
B, or C or whatever. Um, I know sometimes when I'm buying stuff, I don't know exactly what I need until I see some numbers attached to
yeah.
different scenarios. What do you think about that when it comes to pricing for independent consultants?
Yeah, I definitely like to get to the sometimes I notice that consultants are prematurely providing pricing before they know what the solution is, before the potential client knows really what the solution is that they want.
Right.
And they're using that as kind of a gating mechanism. And so the first thing that I like to recommend to consultants as you're working through this proposal process is to really get clear and help the potential client to understand and invest upfront in that solution development, like co-developing the solution, to
Hmm.
get really clear on why are they doing this, what is the outcome they want to see, why are they doing this now versus later, why are they doing this with you as a consultant
Hmm.
versus internally, really getting them to be your champion, to be your advocate. A lot of times they'll have to, a lot of times I'll have to get some other form of approval. So being able to arm them and feel like they're part of the solution that has been designed, is the first prerequisite to the pricing question. And then ultimately, a couple of things that I noticed from a pricing perspective, I agree with your approach in terms of offering a couple of options. I like to offer two of them because a confused mind, as I say, a confused mind doesn't buy.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to offer two. So it gets really, which one you think would deliver the best result for them. And then you give them something that might be a little bit smaller, like maybe a phase 1 or something like that as the other option. And then I notice this a lot where consultants have the tendency to want to just like email it over and hope for the best versus let's have a conversation about this and presenting the investment and walking the client through in the real time, so you can understand what their reaction is and what objections they might have and really figure out what direction to take the proposal from there.
Yeah, it's a great point. And people sometimes get surprised because, I automate the proposal process online and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you still want to present it to the person
Yeah.
and be there with them to discuss it. That's essential.
Yeah, absolutely. The tool that you've created doesn't replace that human connection. It just enables it to be a lot more efficient. So
Now, there's something else you said. You had a lot of great questions that I hope people are going to pay really close attention to, because if you ask those questions and get really clear on the answers, everything's going to go so much better. But something that I see people neglecting to do time and time again, neglecting to ask. And in fact, there's a line in my sort of fill in the blank proposal template that says, why are you asking us for help with this? Right? Like you were saying, why are you asking a consultant? Why aren't you doing it yourselves? Why me, not somebody else? Because they're going to tell you why they think you're awesome.
Right.
And why they trust you to do this. And that's going to unlock so much of, are they right? Because if they're not right, we should send them to somebody who's really going to be the right fit for them. But if they are, make sure that that's called out explicitly. We're here because we're down the street, or we're here because we know Bob, or we're here because we've done 28 of these in 12 different countries. Whatever it is that they're like, that's what we've heard is great about you. Let's make sure that's in there, versus hoping that everyone who is looking at the proposal later knows exactly why they're talking to you.
That's right. Exactly. And if for some reason they can't answer that question, then you need to dig in further there, because for whatever reason, it's not connecting. And so that's going to be potentially a reason why they don't choose to move forward. And you want to be able to address that proactively. But a lot of times, it becomes this challenge mentally, Ruben. You're not selling something you're selling yourself in this case. Right. And so it's not that you're selling this software product that your company created, you are selling yourself. And so we intertwine sometimes what I call a thought error. We intertwine our own self-worth, our own, worthiness about who we are as a human to whether or not they want to move forward with us. And so being able to decouple that and ask the questions that you really need the answers to without making it mean that you're going to fail at this company or anything like that. Really being mindful of separating those two things is such an important success factor.
Yeah. And I try to think about, like, if you're a doctor, right? Like, why is somebody choosing you? Maybe they choose somebody else who has less experience, but their office is closer, or vice versa, or whatever, right? Like, you don't control that stuff.
No.
And you should be happy that the client is doing the thing that makes them happy. And there's some stuff like they may say, well, you're new. We went with this other person who has 10 years of experience. Okay. That's totally fine, right? Like, you can't fix that. And you shouldn't take it as a slight against you. Now, if they were like, well, there were a bunch of grammatical errors and in the math in your proposal didn't add up. Well, that's an important learning that you can fix, right? You can, but there's, like you say, some things you control, focus on them, and some things you can't, just let them be. And I think there's something tying back to what you said originally about making sure you're clear on whose problems you're solving and what those problems are. The more you're clear on that, the more likely it is that the people you're talking to are going to want you to solve them. Right.
Absolutely.
And you get more positive, even if you don't win the deal, you get more positive reinforcement. You have better conversation. You have a better vibe, versus I've been in that situation where I'm talking to people that I'm not really the right fit for, and everything just is like swimming upstream.
Yeah.
And that feels exhausting, because it is. So stop doing that. Right.
That's right. Exactly. When you can have that kind of connection and they know, what you're talking about, and you love talking about that and really digging into that type of problem is such magic in my mind. Versus like, I know I can do this. I better, figure out how to, and making this uphill battle for yourself. Yeah.
That was my entire accidental subconscious sales strategy when I started, right? Because I tried all the conscious stuff I tried failed
Mm,
because I was trying to be somebody else. But then
mm,
when I forgot and I was just in the room talking about stuff, they're like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about and he gives a
yeah.
damn,
Yeah.
right? Unlike the last group in here that was trying to, just sell us whatever. It's
Yeah.
clear that Ruben is probably not very good at that stuff.
Yeah.
But that he cares a lot. So anyway, yeah, I think that's awesome. What else should people be thinking about in terms of mindset? We've covered a lot of ground, from positioning to rejection to selling to proposals and pricing. Is there anything that we've left out that you want to make sure people walk away with?
Yeah, I think we touched on it briefly, Ruben, but just really, it might sound kind of nebulous, but just really looking at what your self-identity is and thinking about, who am I now? I am a business owner. I am a consultant. Like, you have so many hats to wear. One of the tools I love sharing with people is like, think about all the different hats that you wear now. You're the CEO, you're the business owner, you're the CRO, you're the CMO, you're all the C's, and you're the employee.
Right.
And thinking about your business from that 360-degree view and problem solving it. And in some ways, it kind of divorces the personalness out of it, because it's like, okay, today we were talking about fun. It's like, how fun is it just to put on a different hat? Today, I'm the CEO and I'm going to look at this problem or this goal that I have from this lens and sort of think about it. And then, a few hours later, you can put on the employee hat and think about it from that perspective, and really just start building up your identity, that you're not a director of engineering anymore, or whatever your old title used to be, that you are a business owner. You wear all of these, you get to wear all of these hats, you choose to wear all of these hats. And how can you try them on and look at what you're doing from different lenses, and start rebuilding your self-identity, that you're no longer an employee with this title for this company, that you are a business owner who thinks in that way and does have control over your own success.
That's great. I think the notion that, hey, we're choosing to do this is
Yes.
really powerful. Now, at the same time, someone's going to say, oh my gosh, I've got 12 hats on. But this 13th one is killing me. Is that when they call
Yeah.
you? Like, what should someone do when they're just feeling overwhelmed? How do people ask for help?
Yeah, that's an amazing point, because for us as consultants, we see ourselves as experts.
Mm-hmm.
We think it's a deficit or something's wrong with us when we need to ask for help. But at the end of the day, you can either struggle along the path and figure it all out on your own, which I've been there and done that. Or you can, raise your hand and say, look, I'm amazing at what I do as a consultant, but I've never been a business owner before. Or I've been a business owner for the last year, but quite frankly, I was just making it all up. And I really want to get into the place where I'm thinking about this as a business. I'm running it as a business. I'm operating strategically and building a company where I'm making more money, I'm making more impact, but I'm also not sacrificing on my work-life balance and the independence that was one of the reasons that led me to become a consultant in the first place. So really just knowing that you can raise your hand just like your clients do to ask for help when you need it, whether it's with a coach like me, or whether it's with someone, a software tool like yours, Ruben, to automate the process, or a marketing agency, whatever it is. Really not being afraid to raise your hand and ask for help. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It actually means that you're being a strategic business owner, really identifying where your weak areas are or opportunities for improvement, and addressing those.
Awesome. Well, let's say that they want to raise their hand and ask you for help. Where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks, Ruben. As you mentioned when we started, I have a podcast also called Grow Your Independent Consulting Business Podcast. Ruben will be a guest on there here shortly as well. So go check that out. And they can also find me on LinkedIn at Melisa-Liberman. And I have a website, which is melisaliberman.com. And I have something called the IC Toolkit. So the letters IC, obviously, Independent Consultant Toolkit. And so you can go there and get a lot of tools related to being a business owner, like a yearly planning process, a process to create work-life balance, and those kinds of things. So go check that out.
Awesome. And Melisa is 1L, 1S, just so you know. And obviously we'll have a link in the show notes. Melisa, thanks so much for joining us. Cheers.
Thanks, Ruben. Cheers. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks for listening. Did something in this episode or a past episode help you out? I'd love to hear about it. Send comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes to hello@salesfornerds.io. And of course, iTunes reviews are super helpful for getting the word out. So if you've got a few moments to put one of those up, I'd really appreciate it. If you got a friend who'd benefit from one of these episodes, send a link. If you got a friend who wouldn't benefit from one of the episodes, but you just haven't talked to in a while, this is a great excuse to pick up the phone and give them a call. Of course, if you're looking for a whole new take on CRM for solo consultants, along with proposal templates, lead magnet ideas, free positioning tools, and more, check it out at mimiran.com. That's MIMIRAN.com. Again, thanks for listening, and until next time.